have a master's degree. I have an MBA. I have a bachelor's in communications. I started a master's in psychology. I didn't finish it. I may finish it sometime in life. We'll see how that goes. I feel like I know too much already, psychologically, and it can get you into trouble, So anyway, I've been working for a long time. I've worked and lived outside the United States. I spent a great deal of time in West Africa. I was there for 9 years. I spent some time in the UK. That's where I did my MBA. But I have traveled to many places. I used to do business in Western Europe and in Brazil. So I speak French. You can call it that. I speak Portuguese. And because of the Portuguese, I have a little Spanish. They're not that similar, but they're similar enough. My husband is from Japan, so I live in a cross-cultural setting every day of the week. I speak a little Japanese, skoshi hanashimasu, skoshi. And I speak a little Mandarin. Well, that's about it. So, and I specialize HR area, but I specialize even further in employee relations, employee engagement, and organizational culture. That's a really good question. I actually went to school for theater first. And for a long time, I was a voice major. I'm a classically trained mezzo-soprano. And on stage, I'm a mezzo belt, sort of Ethel Merman-y. I have an Ethel Merman-y type voice. And I did that for a long time. And I was in New York. I did off-Broadway cabaret. I have a cabaret act. I haven't done it in a long time, so it would have to be, sort of reinvigorated. But one of the things you learn when you start to produce is when you're producing a show, it's a lot like running a project within an organization, right? Running a new initiative or rolling out a new initiative. You have to understand who the stakeholders are. You have to understand what matters to them, right? You have to look at timelines. Some people need to know things before other people. The venue, for example, needs to know the date you're going to do your load in of all your equipment and all your lights and everything before the cast knows. The cast doesn't need to know, Cast, forget the cast. They don't need to know anything. But anyway, it's also about all the moving parts. It's about contracts with performers, contracts with the venue, contracts with other folks that you may not see or hear a lot from, orchestra, lights, grips, people that do the curtains and things, costumers, makeup. And when I sort of transitioned into the business world, I found that HR was kind of the same thing. Mostly, though, HR initiatives, HR projects. The day-to-day of HR, the generalist work every day, I did that too. But where I really sort of hit my stride was in, enterprise-wide initiatives or new programs. Either building them and rolling them out, or just rolling them out, or just building them. But, it's the same idea. It's the same approach. You've got to understand all your stakeholders. You've got to understand their timelines. You've got to understand their pressure points. Right? If there's money involved or if there's critical deadlines involved, everybody's got to understand what's happening. In fact, everyone, I would suspect, not unlike all the people involved in a company, meaning a show, right? The company is the show, and the company, the performance is the end product, right? The work product that we deliver, whether that's rolling it out across, several global locations, or making sure everybody's got the good news, or that they got it and they understand it and they know how to use it if it's a new system, which is really fun. And but I found it to be kind of the same thing. And also in HR, I do a lot of facilitating. I do a lot of training. I do a lot of going to conferences and speaking on panels. I have to do a lot of presenting findings, for example, to senior leaders, or if there's been a survey of some sort, an engagement survey, those wonderful tools. I actually like to use the real-time ones because, in my experience, one that you do, once or twice a year, and then you take 6 months as a leadership team, an executive leadership team, to sort of digest. By the time you get around to doing something, people have sort of forgotten. It hasn't gone off their list, but it's at the bottom. Right? It's not still up in that shiny new spot, right? when you use live feedback, one, your senior executives cannot ignore it. Okay. This isn't me talking, Mr. CEO, Mr. CFO, Mr. CIO. These are your people. Here's what they're saying. See, it's not me. It's not being filtered through HR. And they're also saying that they're kind of demanding that we take action. So let's do that. Let's do it right now, So I like that kind of stuff. And it's all tied to my performance background. So I was trained that way, So I got into business. I did gravitate toward HR very early on, and I spent some time doing the grunt work of HR. This was, now I'm going to date myself. I remember when we got our first computers, and the email was only within the group. You could only ping people that had another computer, which of course now is everybody, right? But at that time, that wasn't the case. I remember typing on Wang computers. I don't know if you remember those. Yeah, this was, back in the dark ages when the office was a cave and you had to start a fire every morning, So I was there. I spent several years kind of balancing the two. I'd perform at night and rehearse, at night, and then I would go to work during the day. That got to be a little bit too much. So I ended up doing just theater for a little while, and then I went and I made a full switch to just business for a while. And then, of course, in New York, I picked up doing it daytime and nighttime again, because it's just easy. In New York, you meet people, it's easy to do. And I did that for a while, until about, I'm going to say 15 years ago, maybe. And I haven't done any theater since then. So no singing, no dancing, other than in the shower. So yeah, it's always been part of who I am, part of what I do. So, but I see the two as being very closely linked, at least what I do in business. Know your audience, and I really mean that. Know your audience. If you're presenting to C-level staff, understand what makes them tick. Okay, do your homework. If you're presenting to, the most important thing is learn your audience, know your audience, and listen to your audience. When you're on stage performing live, a lot can happen. Hopefully you like it to be everything that you rehearsed, but often it's not, right? And I would sort of strongly suggest that that's often what happens in meetings, especially really important ones. You expect the client to behave a certain way, or expect your boss to behave a certain way, and something happens and nobody acts the way they're supposed to behave. And you have to be agile. You have to be aware. You have to be listening all the time, so you know how to retrieve information, sort of almost redirect, and you have to do it kind of on a dime. So if something is horribly wrong and a client's in the room, you want to be able to take care of that client in a way that says, I'm in command, I understand what's going on, and even if I don't, I know the person who does, so let me go get that person for us. Let's get this sorted out right now. Or let's end the meeting now, and let's go back. We clearly haven't done enough of the homework. Let's go get that done, and then we'll meet again. Those sorts of things, which are kind of like standard. But you'd be surprised how many professional people don't know how to do that. I'm mortified every time I get in a room with someone. How's this going to go? And I think, and I don't mean any disparagement, but I feel like us old dogs, even though we're still learning new tricks, that sort of stuff was imperative because everything was done face-to-face, right? And it was done without the knowledge of a digital world or digital platforms or digital exchanges. They came and sort of seeped their way in to the day-to-day, whereas younger people have never known a world without digital interface, right? So they're like, why do I have to do that? That doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, your client's on the call, and you may want to take care of the client. I'm just saying, And when I say client, it could be anybody. It could be an external. I used to sell cross-cultural consulting, and a lot of times my clients would want to come to the personal training of like a couple or a family. And I'm like, no. And they'd be like, well, what do you mean I'm paying for it? And I said, yes, you're paying for it because you want them to succeed. And for them to succeed, they have to have undivided attention in that training room. And if you are sitting there, there will not be undivided attention. This is not a test. This is not a performance review. This is about them being able to survive on the ground in the new location with their kids going to a strange new school. Like, you just don't get it. So I think it's important to hold your line, but also important to know how to deal with folks face to face and kind of understand the lines which you will not cross. Integrity, inclusiveness to a point. Transparency, absolutely. I told them outright, it's not going to work. You're not coming to the training. I'll give you a training. I'll arrange to have one of my people sit with you one-on-one, or you and your wife, you can get a training. I'll do it at no cost, but you're not sitting in on this one. Thanks so much for asking. But I think it's important to know, who the client is. And again, that's not always an external, right? It might be the head of another division or somebody in the next department, who asked you for something. And I think it's always important to have that as kind of a backdrop against which you perform. Just like in theater, you have a backdrop that hides that back brick wall, right? And then you perform in front of that. And I think that backdrop is made up of lots of different things. And I think you need to carry those things with you all the time. You can't ever lose sight of those. They're really, really important. Oh, what I love about consulting is my own hours. I can't lie. I can't lie. And just like I was describing, I get to say yes or no. If a client says to me, I'd really like to do X, and I say, here's what I can do to help you with your issue as you've described it. I do the whole intake, I do the needs assessment, the whole thing, prepare something for them. And they're like, that's great, but I'd also like you to do this. Sometimes you have to say no. Or if I have a client who thinks they're going to do the work themselves and, just give me the outline. Just give me the outline. And I'm like, no. I think you have to be in charge of yourself. You have to manage yourself in any situation, right? So, yeah, I think for consulting, I feel like I'm my own boss. I get to choose the client. I get to choose my hours, and I get to focus solely on the things that I'm not just good at, but that feed me, that feed my soul. When you see people taking ownership of something and participating in the building of it, and then the execution of it, it gets serious. People take it really personally, and they really make an effort to ensure its success. I feel like they're all my kids. I feel so proud. Like you just want to cry. It's great. But it's like seeing your kid win a prize. It really is. When they get it and you see all the light bulbs go off, bing, 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 bing in the room. Oh man, that's better than Christmas. That's better than Hanukkah. That's better than everything. So that's what I love about consulting. I think the toughest lesson I've ever learned was in a situation where I was in a corporate setting and I had to work for a boss, and I was drowning and I didn't say anything. And I should have, because it probably would have saved me. But I didn't. It was too late. By the time we were talking about it, it was too late, pretty much. And I'm not sure where that comes from, except that I know I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to ask for help. Even though I do ask for help, I've sort of trained myself now. But when I was younger, I was kind of like, hey. And so I think being able to ask for help, saying I don't know, and bring it up. Hey, boss, I love this job. I love being here, but I'm really feeling lost. I don't feel like I have my land legs. Here's what's happening on my day to day. What can we do to help change the situation? Do it early, right? As soon as it starts. As the minute you recognize it, you should be talking to your boss. If you can. Not all bosses can be talking, but there you go. But yeah, I think that's a tough one, because it ends up reflecting in performance evaluations, or you could be fired. I mean, things happen, right? This is real life. So yeah, I think that's the toughest one. know what you're good at, know your strengths, and hire for the places that aren't your strengths. You know, if you can get one other person who's like a perfect complement to you in your skill set, that's probably a good place to start. But I mean, there's the standard, like do your homework, know your market, know your competitor. Yeah, this is all standard operating procedure. But I think the most important thing is, as a leader, you must lead. Don't get in the weeds, and don't do things that you're not good at. Don't do that. You'll be screwed as fast as you can say Jack Robinson. And I mean, I really mean that. If you know what it is you do, why you're on this planet, then just do that. And then practice being a good CEO or a good leader. Find others who can help fill in those gaps, you know, and they're out there. There's tons of great people out there. So, yeah, if that makes any sense. I used to think when I was selling cross-cultural consulting that people had misunderstood what cross-cultural consulting was. Like because I started doing that in New York City right after I'd been out of the country for like 9 years. And when I came back and I saw them doing this, and it was like a thing. And I said, guys, this is just OD on a global basis. Hello? And they'd be like, no, you can't say that. And I'm like, but it is. And people they looked at really like I was crazy. It was like I was going to, ruin their whole niche in the marketplace. But the truth is, it really is just organizational development on a global scale. It's understanding that you are not the center of the universe, and that lots of other people have opinions that are counter to yours, and you are now on a team with that person. What do you do, right? That's such a good question. I think the biggest challenge facing HR now is, what is HR? So for example, in startups, and let's say the CEO has their thing, right? They know exactly what they're doing, and they've got everything set up, and they've been in business for a year. Then they hire an HR person. But the CEO is, because they know exactly what their money, they know how to make the money. They're the money maker. They're very, very involved in recruiting, recruiting and selection. That's supposed to be HR, right? They're very, very involved in performance, both acknowledging superior performance and disciplining not so great performance. That's supposed to be HR. Developing programs, like pay for performance, or a performance management cycle, or they have all these very, very strong ideas. And I'm like, if that's the case, then write them all down and just hire a tech, somebody to build it for you. And then you can do it on, you don't really need an HR person for that. I think I know that HR went through these years and years and years of, you got to have data. And I'm like, that's right, you need data, but we're talking about people. Here's your data. You have people. People are, they're bound to make mistakes. People are going to lie under certain circumstances. People may even steal under certain circumstances. People that you thought were incredibly upstanding, fine human individuals, right? But if you don't learn them, if you don't understand them, and you don't get to know them, you're going to look at that top layer, and you're going to make your decisions there. And you may have just cut yourself off from some of the best talent you ever had, because you didn't understand what was happening at the lower levels. Now, I get it. Stealing is bad. Okay? People should be fired. But I guess what I'm saying is, under pressure, or if people feel undervalued or not valued at all, a lot of behaviors that you would not normally see can rise to the surface, and they can be pretty ugly. And that's when I think you need HR. Maybe I'm off whack here, and I don't know, you're not even old enough to remember these days when HR was just personnel. They were just the paper pushers. Fill out this form. Then it was, the benefits people. Then it was payroll and comp. And then it was reward, total rewards, performance management and all that. Then it was, data, what's your turnover rate? What's your this and what's your that? What are your metrics? What source gives you the best talent? Blah, 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 blah. And the 9 box, which is a joke. Don't even get me started on the 9 box for succession planning. But anyway, it has no scientific application for human resources. Can I just say that? Let me just say that, okay? And trust me, I know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I think it's things like that. Every time there's like a new fad in another part of the working world, I think it's important to understand that it may or may not have use within the four walls of the HR space. Ninebox was built to do something in manufacturing. It wasn't built for HR, and we just borrowed it, okay? These things all existed in other types of businesses, and HR said, well, we can do that. We have data. And I'm like, okay. But then you realize people are being left out. People are being overlooked. The criteria that is being used for making judgments, making decisions is skewed, borderline biased, And I'm just like, guys, this isn't making any sense. So I think the biggest thing facing HR today is to actually be the human part of human resources. And I know that sounds terribly cliche, but with all the data that could be pumped out by an HR analyst and talk to you about trends and whatnot, and, your talent acquisitions metrics, blah, 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 or your performance metrics, and your percentage of, high performers to get promoted, blah, 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 that stuff. That's all wonderful, interesting. I don't care very much about it. Did I just say that out loud? Because I feel like that stuff will all fall into place naturally and don't get me wrong, I've used data. I use it all the time. So I'm kind of like speaking against myself, but I have this really strong both experience and gut feel from the startup world that HR is it's almost like it's dissipating out into the rest of the organization, because people, especially in a startup, when you have people working overseas, you have remote people, they're managing themselves, right? Pretty much. They may touch base with you for something, like, my pay screwed up. But I feel if you don't, even in a remote setting where everybody's remote, if you don't get to know your people, good luck. Basically all I can say. Good luck. And I've had it work both ways. I've had it work where I felt I knew my people, and I had one person mutiny. And I've had it where I didn't know my people well, and it wasn't a mutiny, but I couldn't get anything done. It's like Congress, right? It's that same dynamic, if I can use that as like an analogy. But anyway, I think that's what I think is facing HR these days. I think most HR professionals who want to keep their jobs say it's for the company. And I have no problem with that. I think it is for the company, because you want to, in large sort of still very corporate settings, you want to take that stuff off the plate of your C-level folks, right? You want them to be free to do the strategic thinking and the financial planning. You want them to take care of the business so that the business can take care of you. You still have a job, right? That I get and I understand, and I think that's true. But I think ultimately, I actually think HR is in a place right now where they could be much more on the side of employee or contractor or worker, whatever the legal, categorization of that person is. I think, if it's the Philippines or India or, Scotland or Switzerland, whatever, right? You need to really have a solid understanding of the law and probably have somebody on the ground there, help feed you that stuff. But I think there's a role for advocacy that doesn't exist. And I think it's because HR wants to survive, because let's face it, it's a cost center, right? And it's a big one. So how can you say it's not needed, right? I mean, I think you can, but that's just me, because I think everything is up for change. But I think, as I said, most HR professionals at the senior level will tell you that it's for the company, but it is not just for the company. It's meant to be there, meant to be a center of knowledge, a center of information, a center of excellence in terms of how things get done relative to managing the business life of each employee or each worker, depending on their categorization. But I do see advocacy as there's a big gap, especially in situations like startups where you've got the core team, you got 8 people sitting in Nashville and you got the rest of them in India. You got 300 people in India. Who's advocating for those people, right? So that's just me. That's my